So our parsha today is it's a double. So we've got hukim, or it's talking about ordinances, statutes, mandates, things like that. And then we've got the story of Balak and Balaam to bring it up at the end. But let's start in chapter 19. Let's read verses 1 and 2, please.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, This is a law of the Torah which Yahweh has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer, a perfect one, in which there is no blemish, and on which a yoke has never come.
So here's the thing. It's talking about this ordinance here. So when we talk about a hook, right, we're talking about this ordinance or this statute. And the thing about a hook is that a lot of times to our natural mind, they don't make any sense. How can you take a cow and burn it, right? And mix its ashes with water, and that be for a cleansing of sin for people? To the natural mind, it just doesn't make any sense. But we have to also remember that everything in the tabernacle, right? Everything that was being done there pointed toward Yahushua, right? Everything that, from every tent peg to every wall hanging, everything had something to do with him, and it pointed directly to him. And a lot of times the things in the scriptures may not make any sense to the natural mind. But that's the thing. It's kind of like when we were young, when we were of a certain age, and we would come to our parents would say, hey, don't do XYZ, whatever that thing happens to be. Don't do that. And us, of course, we're ever inquisitive. We say, why? Why can't I do that? And sometimes we just got the answer, well, because I said so. And that was your answer. That's what you got. And that's kind of how it is with a hook, with an ordinance. Sometimes they don't make sense to the natural mind, but it's something that the Father had them do. Okay. So the thing is, we have to remember too that all of this stuff was done during the Levitical priesthood. Okay. All these animal sacrifices, this water purification, all of this kind of stuff was done during the Levitical priesthood. And the thing is to remember that now we're not operating under the Levitical priesthood. Okay. We operate under the order of Melchizedek, right? The scriptures say that Yahushua is a high priest over or after the priesthood of Melchizedek. So that's a much more ancient and a much higher priesthood than the Levites were. Not taking anything away from the Levites and the service that they provided. But what I'm saying is, some of these things, they didn't make much sense. So we got to remember too, when the Father tells us to do something, he means it. He told Moses several times, 4 times, in fact, make sure that you make all of these things after the pattern that I showed you in the mount, right? And the reason for that was so that they didn't get the picture of his son wrong. They didn't get it incorrect. All right. And everything here, and we're going to talk about this in the next couple of verses, all of this stuff, even this heifer, even this red cow that they burnt, all right, there was a reason for it. Even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us, like I said, and especially in this day and age. But let's go ahead and read verses 3 through 5, please.
And you shall give it to Eleazar the Cohen, and he shall bring it outside the camp and shall slaughter it before him. And Eleazar the Cohen shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times toward the front of the tent of appointment. And the heifer shall be burned before his eyes. He burns the hide and its flesh and its blood and its dung.
Okay. Oh, is that it?
That was 5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. Did you say 7?
Mm-hmm.
And the Cohen shall take the cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet and throw them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer.
No, it was 3 through 5. I'm sorry. I told you wrong. I'm sorry. So 3 through 5. So, like I said, the thing is, this heifer had to be burnt up completely. right? All of this stuff, the skin and the hide and the dung and all this, it was burned up completely, just like the whole burnt offering was, right? So there's a parallel there. Now, instead of this being burnt in the courtyard or on the brazen altar, it was burnt outside the camp because it was what? It was a purification for sin, right? And sin cannot be in the camp. All right. So here's the first thing. Yahushua was our sacrifice for what? For sin, right? So that's why he had to be outside the camp or outside the city, right? And so again, we see the burning of this red heifer that where the water for purification was made, and it was burned outside the camp because sin can't be in the camp. Why? Because Yahweh walks through the midst of it, right? So that's one thing. Now, it also talks about that Eliezer, right? He took this blood from this and he did what with it? He sprinkled it 7 times before the meeting tent of the congregation. All right. So he sprinkles this blood. All right. Well, we've seen he sprinkles it 7 times, just like we've seen before, because we've seen in the case of the sin offering in Leviticus chapter 4, he does the same thing. The priest sprinkles the blood 7 times, right? What about the consecration of the furniture and the implements for the tabernacle, right? He took the anointing oil. Now, in this case, it wasn't blood, it was anointing oil, but he did what with it? He sprinkled it 7 times. Okay. So that was for the consecration of the temple furniture. That's in Leviticus chapter 8. Well, what about the cleansing of lepers by water? Okay. Same thing. That's in Leviticus 14. He talks about that they take that water and they sprinkle it on them 7 times. So there's something going on here. All right. There's something going on here. And that's even to take it to, the Brit Hadashah. Let's go to Matthew 18 and read verses 21 and 22. And let's see what happens here. There's a question that's asked here. Okay.
Matthew 18, verses 21 and 22. Then came Kepha to him and said, My master, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I shall forgive him till 7 times? Yahushua said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7.
Okay, so here Kepha or Peter, he's asking about forgiveness. And he says, how many times do I forgive him? Do I forgive him 7 times? And Yahushua said, no, you forgive him 70 times 7, right? 490 times. That seems kind of crazy, but what he's saying is you just keep on doing it. All right. You can't, we as a people, and sometimes we get frustrated with people and we think, man, this guy done me dirty so many times. This person has done me wrong so many times. I'm just going to give up on it. But that's the thing. We really can't. All right. And that's what Yahushua was talking about. He said, it doesn't matter how many times he does you wrong. All right. We need to forgive. How many times did the children of Israel do Yahweh wrong? Yeah, a lot. That's like where it says, you tempted me these 10 times. Well, I promise you that they tempted him a whole lot more than 10 times while they were out there in the desert. Okay. But the thing is, it shows the pattern, right? The Father, the Psalms say that his mercy endures forever. All right. And ours should be the same way. Now, here's the thing. If I have to keep forgiving somebody because they keep doing me wrong, I probably need to kind of make my way away from that person. Right. So, don't keep putting yourself back in that situation. You may like that person. They may be your friend. You may love them, whatever. But if they keep doing these things, you got to forgive them, but you don't need to be hanging out with them and letting them despitefully use you that way, as the scriptures say. And Yahushua himself even talked about it in Luke 17, verses 3 and 4.
Luke 17:3 and 4. Take heed to yourselves. If thy brother trespass against thee, rebuke him. And if he repent, forgive him. And if he trespass against thee 7 times in a day, and 7 times in a day turn again to thee and saying, I repent, thou shalt forgive him.
So Yahushua is saying the same thing. It doesn't matter, right? But there's one thing that we got to know here. That person needs to do what? They need to repent. They need to apologize. They need to be sorry for what they've done, right? And if you can tell that it's genuine, you know, it's kind of like it didn't happen. You know what I mean? You remember it, right? That's why scriptures talk about, being wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Okay, we remember these things, and maybe that colors our judgment later on. We kind of move away from that person, or we distance ourselves from them. Doesn't mean that we don't love them, that we don't care about them, but it means that we don't put ourselves back in that situation. All right, we do our part. We do our part. What's our part? To forgive them, right? To go, hey, look, let's make this right between us, and we go on our way. But like I said, it's kind of like when you think about this forgiveness and the amount of times that Yahushua said that we're to forgive a person, think about how many times that they did something against the Father in the desert. So many times. And and here's the thing, there were times when he distanced himself from them, right? But scriptures also tell us that Israel is the apple of his eye, and he made her a promise that he would always look after her. But he said, I was a husband to you, and you done me this way, you done me wrong, and you've done this and you've done that. Nevertheless, here's the thing that we have to remember. He didn't have to, but he sent his son so that we would have a way back to him. You see, he wasn't, he didn't have to do that, but he did, right? And it's the same thing. We got to learn how to forgive people for when they do stuff. Because the scriptures say that if we don't forgive others, neither will our Father in heaven forgive us, right? So we've got to learn how to do that. And you hear us talking about getting MAD and getting the subbing up bubbles. That's Dad's little deal, talking about, when you got something against somebody, But the thing to remember is that when we truly forgive a person, we can see them and we can talk to them, and we don't get that bubbling up inside. All right. It doesn't mean that they're free from what they did. Okay. It doesn't mean that they didn't do wrong, but it takes the monkey off of your back and frees you from that. And this water that we're talking about, this cow ash water, whatever it was, this stuff was for the sprinkling. It was for purification and forgiveness on our part, right? Towards loved ones and friends. And like I said, it does not clear them for what they've done. But what it does is it takes the monkey off our back, right? It purifies our hearts and our conscience, so we're not held accountable for what we felt towards them. Nobody likes to be betrayed. That's not a good feeling, especially when it's a person that you think, that you feel that you can trust, and, it's a person that you care about. And when they betray your trust like that, it hurts. We've all had that happen, haven't we? We've all had someone do that to us. And sometimes it's hard. You get your feelings stomped on. Sometimes it's hard. But the thing is, we've got to remember that just as he, and if anybody had the right to hold a grudge, it's the Father. But by his example, he sent his son so that we could be forgiven. And we need to learn how to do the same thing. Like I said, it ain't easy, and I understand that. But we need to make sure that when we forgive somebody, or we say we do, that we truly do. That means don't keep bringing it up, right? Because if you keep dredging it up, ma'am, If you keep dredging it up, then you have not forgiven that person. Okay. And you keep throwing it in their face, you've not forgiven that person. So the only person that you're fooling is yourself. Okay. And we've all, again, I think we've all been there. Oh, I forgive that person, but then, boy, it just flies. Huh? Yeah, you got to say something, or it flies back in your face, and boy, then you just as mad as you were when it happened the first time. Okay, well, you haven't really forgiven that person, and if that's the case, you need to get that under the blood. Um, let's get some water of the word on that and clean it up. Because like I said, you need to get that off of you so that when we appear before Him, that we're not held accountable for that. Verse number 6, please.
And the Cohen shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet and throw them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer.
So, what does this sound like to you? What does this sound like to you? Let's go back to Leviticus 14 and look at verses 2 through 9.
Leviticus 14, 2 through 9. This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing, and he shall be brought unto the priest. And the priest shall go forth out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy be healed in the leper. Then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood and scarlet and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it, and the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and shall dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle upon him that is to be cleansed from the leprosy 7 times, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose into the open field. And he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, wash himself in water, that he may be clean. And after that he shall come into the camp, and shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. But it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, even all his hairs he shall shave off, and he shall wash his clothes. Also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean.
So it just be just like he was completely reborn, right? He got no hair. He's got no hair on his face, no eyebrows, none of that stuff. Just be like a brand new, like a newborn. But that's the thing. So this is another one of those hukim, right? Why would you take 2 birds and kill one and put it in a pot? And I don't know. I have no idea. I really don't know. But the idea is that the one bird is let loose, right? So it's like the sin, or the yeah, it's kind of the scapegoat type thing, right? So you've got the blood for the sacrifice, and it's flying away. But like I said, we're seeing the same thing where they did that with the cleansing for the leper. We're doing that again with this water of purification for the cleansing of the other sins, right? Same thing, scarlet and hyssop and cedar wood, and we could go all day long talking about, medicinal properties and this and that and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, this is another one of those things that we don't really know, exactly why he said to do it that way. All we know is that he said to do it that way. Which again, in the tabernacle, there's a lot of killing going on. There's a lot of bloodletting and sacrificing. I'm glad we ain't got to do all that. I don't have the stomach for it. I don't have the heart for it. I can't do that. I'm glad. I appreciate it. That the Father sent us a different way to have to do that. Because I just, I couldn't do it. I don't have the ability to do that. Verses 7 through 10, please.
The Cohen shall then wash his garments, and shall bathe his body in water, and afterwards come into the camp. But the Cohen is unclean until evening. And he who is burning it washes his garments in water, and shall bathe his body in water, and is unclean until evening. And a clean man shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and shall place them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel, and for the water for uncleanness. It is for cleansing from sins. And he who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his garments, and is unclean until evening. And it shall be a law forever to the children of Israel, and to the stranger who sojourns in their midst.
Okay, so here's the thing. Why was this heifer being burned up? What was this for? It was for purification of sin, right? So stick with me here. So even though this heifer was for the purification of sin, everybody who came in contact with the heifer became unclean, right? And they had to wash themselves before they could come back into the camp. And this is an excellent image of how sin taints us. Okay. When we come into contact with sin or sinful things, when we come into contact with this, especially if it's something that we used to enjoy, right? Because there's a lot of sins out there that we used to enjoy, right? Whole lot of different things. Huh? Well, I mean, that's the thing. It talks about, that Moshe chose to suffer affliction with his people rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, right? Sin is pleasurable. Is it not? For the most part, it is pleasurable until we have to pay for it. Then it's not. But this is the thing. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of sinful things that we all used to enjoy. Ain't none of us perfect. Okay. Last time I checked, I ain't seen nobody be able to walk on water. So, we all used to sin and we used to enjoy the things. And that's the thing. It's easy. It's very easy to fall back into it again if we're not rooted and grounded in the word. Let's go to Luke 17, 31 and 32.
Luke 17, 31 and 32. In that day, he which shall be upon the housetop and his stuff in the house, let him not come down to take it away. And he that is in the field, let him likewise not return back. Remember Lot's wife.
Okay, so what happened with Lot's wife? She looked back, right? They told him, get out of here. Don't come back. Don't even look back. But there was something back there in Sodom and Gomorrah that she just couldn't let go of. Is that true? That's what the scriptures tell us. There was something there she couldn't let go of. And so when she turned around to look at it, boom. King size salt lick, right? She became a pillar of salt. All right. Same book, Luke. Let's look at 9 and 62.
Luke 9, verse 62.
Mm-hmm.
And Yahushua said unto him, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of Yahweh.
So here's the thing. If we set our hand to the plow, right? If we live a life, or if we're living this life and we say that we're trying to do the best that we can, and we're trying to follow his word, and we're trying to be a picture of Yahushua, right? We've seen every time that they screwed up the picture of Yahushua, what happened to them? They got cursed and blasted, and their enemies got all kinds of stuff. All right. So here's the thing. If we say that we're living this life, right? If we say that we're following him, but it's like it says in 1 John, if we're not doing what he did, then what's it say about us? If we're saying that we're walking like he did, then we need to be doing exactly what he did, right? So if that's the case, and we're not doing that, then we're giving forth a false image. And that false image is going to bring a reproach on the Father. We can do that real easy when we say that we walk one way, but then we act contrary to how we say that we're walking. Right? What do we call that? Call that being a hypocrite. You say you're doing one thing, but you're doing something else. Okay? So when we're not rooted and grounded, it's easy for that to happen because we don't have that firm foundation. You see? And it's like that man that built his house on the sand, right? If we don't have a firm foundation, what's going on with our foundation? It's moving and it's shifting. And what does it say? When the rains came and the wind buffeted it and all that stuff, it said, and great was the fall of that house. So if we're not walking this thing and we're not rooted and grounded in him, and we're walking it out contrary to what we're supposed to be doing, but we're saying we're doing something else, then when the fall of our house comes, it's going to be a big thing. And it's going to be a bad situation. Okay? Let's go to Ephesians 3, verses 14 through 19.
Ephesians 3, 14 through 19. For this cause I bow my knees unto the Father of our Master Yahushua the Messiah, of whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man, that the Messiah may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth, the length, the depth, and the height, and to know the love of Messiah, which passes knowledge, that ye might be filled with the fullness of Yahweh.
Okay, so that's the thing. We got to be rooted and grounded. And we got it, like I told a friend of mine, where we got to know that we know that we know that we know. You know what I'm saying? And look, like I said, we all enjoyed sinful things that we were doing. Okay. Yeah, that's when, we enjoyed those things. But when we left that stuff, we left it. And you can't go back. As we said, any man who puts his hand to the plow and then does what? Turns back is not fit for the kingdom. Do you want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, or do you want to hear, depart from me, I never knew you? Oh, but I wore my tzitzit and I ate clean and I did it. Don't matter. Wearing your tzitzit and eating clean and having a beard and keep your head, that's not going to save you, right? There's only one thing that saves you, and that's the blood of Yahushua. So the point is, you can be doing all this stuff. Like this preacher I saw one time, he had a whole office full of stuff from the Holy Land, but it's all just artifacts. And if this is just a costume that you're wearing, right? We walk this thing every day, right? This ain't just a suit that we put on to come to shul on Shabbat. We wear this every day, right? And the thing is, if I'm professing to live this life, but the fruit that I'm putting out is rotten, or it ain't, you know what I'm saying? Then it's no good. I could have 14 head coverings on and it ain't going to help me none. Yeah, you would look pretty silly with 14 hats sticking on top of your head. But like I said, we got to be rooted and grounded. And I promise you that whatever we feel, because, we've all been there. Yeah. It's just like with the children of Israel, right? Oh, when we was in Egypt, we had this and we had that, blah, blah, blah. And we're looking through these rose-colored glasses. You know what I mean? Everything was so much better back then. It's like what they talked about when they said, when we were making sacrifices to the Queen of Heaven, we had plenty of food and we had this and we had, you know what I mean? And it's just a bunch of baloney, And even, and like I said, we may feel like that we're missing things. We may feel that we've lost out on things, But let me tell you this, whatever you feel like you've lost for his sake, all right, for his name's sake, I promise you it's going to be restored to you manifold in the world to come. Okay? So it's worth it. What we lose here is worth it because we got something coming that we can't even begin. This little peanut brain of ours can't even begin to fathom what he has waiting for us. But we got to do some things, right? We got to keep his commandments. We got to love his son. We've got to profess him. We've got to confess our sin. We've got to repent of the things. And just like what what Yahushua told the woman, he said, go and what? Sin no more. That means don't do it again, right? No matter how bad you want to, don't do it again, right? And you don't ever hear that woman doing it again. But the point is, he said, go and sin no more. He said, woman, where be your accuser? She said, no man accuses me. And what did he say? Neither do I accuse you. Right? So go and sin no more. That's the type of Savior we have. All right? Take that stuff, cast it behind his back, right? And it's done. He ain't going to be dragging it up. He ain't going to be, because when he forgives fully. And that's our example. That's our leader. That's what we should be doing. If we say that we follow him, we should walk just as he walked. And that means when we say we've forgiven, that we need to forgive. When we say we've left that other thing in the past, we need to leave it in the past. And like I said, don't go digging it back up again, because that shows that you didn't ever really leave it in the first place. Like that fella I told y'all about. He'd come down there to the altar every week. Oh, please take these cigarettes away from me. I got to get rid of these things. They killing me. And he'd take them out of his pocket and put them right there on the altar, and he'd pray. And I mean, he'd sweat and cry and call out and snot running and everything else. When he'd get up, he'd grab them and put them right back in his shirt pocket. You didn't do nothing but waste your time. See what I'm saying? If we leave it, we need to leave it. Just like Dad's example from years and years ago, the man that had the bag on his back. You remember that? You got a guy that's walking, he's got this bag, and this bag has got all kinds of things in there. Got all kinds of sins and hard feelings and heartbreaks and all this. And he's dragging this, and he's like, man, this bag is so heavy. Right? But here's all he has to do. He just got to let go of it. And when you let go of it and it drops, man, imagine how much lighter it is now. Now he can go on and he can get to high stepping because he ain't being held down by this bag full of junk. It's certainly not doing him any good. Right? And sin don't do us no good. So if we leave it, or if we say we leave it, we need to leave it. Amen? All right. And like I said, you ain't lost nothing. By getting rid of sin, you ain't lost nothing. You've gained a whole lot more. I'm going to say that again. By leaving sin behind, you haven't lost anything, but you have gained a whole lot more. All right? So that's the thing. When we leave it, we leave it. Now, verses 11 through 22, I'm not going to ask you to read those, Mom, because that's a pretty good stat, but it's different rules. Okay. Different rules for like cleansing lepers, or if somebody touches a dead body, or cleansing a house, stuff like that. And that's part of what this water of separation, this water of purification, again, that would be sprinkled on and this and that. But here's the thing to remember. This is for purification of sin, right? Sin makes it as if, even if we haven't done these things, sin in our lives makes it as if we have touched a dead body, or we're a leper, or we have unresolved, unrepented things in our lives. It makes it just that way. That's why it's so important that if we pray for forgiveness and if we say that we have left it behind, we really need to do it, because you don't want that stuff rolling around in your life. And the worst part is sometimes we don't even know that it's there. Right? What's that line, Dad? Sometimes you can roll around in the dirt for so long it no longer feels dirty. You don't know. Mom tells a story about some people who used to come into the store when they lived in Oklahoma and said them people was filthy from head to toe, just nasty, right? But it wasn't nothing to them. That's just how they lived their lives. You know, they didn't even know that they was dirty anymore because they'd been dirty for so long. Well, don't you know sin can do the same thing? It can make you feel like this is a normal part of life. And then you just don't know. Because your mind gets all messed up. Sin has an effect on your thinking. All right? It has an effect on your thinking, and you'll be living in a sinful way and thinking that it's just business as usual. Right? Thinking that everything's okay. How many people you hear talk about, oh, I'm saved and sanctified, and they out doing this and doing that and all kind of stuff?
Well, it's like before when we were
It works now.
before we started walking this way, we ate unclean all the time, and that was just normal. It didn't matter how disgusting the thing was that we were eating. We just went, this tastes good.
Yeah, I mean,
we didn't know.
We didn't know, and it was a normal thing for us. But once we found out, no matter how much we loved them things, we left that stuff behind. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not good for us. And it's not good for our lives, and it's not good for our bodies, and well, that's what I'm talking about. It ain't good for our lives. It don't please him. Right? And Yahushua said, I only do them things that please my Father. So if we're not pleasing him, then it's not good for us.
Imagine making bacon your Elohim. That's just about what a lot of people do, because they're like, I won't do this because I love bacon. And
well, like, I saw a thing the other day. This was so stupid. I saw the other day. Somebody was talking about, and I think it was on Facebook, and it was just a post from somebody, and they were talking about something about they had cooked all this bacon. I mean, like a pile of it that big. And it simply said, I did this because I love bacon and I love America. What does eating bacon have anything to do with your patriotism? That's just stupid to me. That kind of thing is stupid. I can love my country without eating bacon. It's just the dumbest thing. But people are so screwed up in their thinking, and it just ridiculous. But this is what I'm trying to tell you. If you got sin in your life, right? If we're sinning, if we're out there doing it, well, it's just like we've touched a dead body, or we're a leper, or we're this, or we're that. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It has the same effect, right? Where does it put us? Outside the camp. It doesn't matter what that sin is. You're still going outside the camp, right? You may not have murdered nobody, but you may be a thief. You may be a liar. Well, guess what? That's going to put you outside the camp, right? Sin is sin. There's no big sin and no little sin. You know what I mean? Sin is sin. Ma'am.
When we were talking about that if you put your hand to the plow,
Mm-hmm.
and that, if you turn back, that you're not fit, we should have gone also to Hebrews 10:29.
Okay.
Which says, of how much sore punishment suppose ye shall he be thought worthy who hath trodden under the foot the Son of Yahweh, and hath counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was set apart an unholy thing, and hath done despite unto the spirit of favor.
See, I had actually looked that up this morning and I just forgot to write
That's
it
a
down.
terrifying
But that
scripture.
is exactly, you're going to take the greatest gift that you could have ever been given and trod it underfoot because you're more worried about getting a bacon cheeseburger than that, and yeah, there's no forgiveness for it. You doing it willingly and or willfully. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. If you're doing it, because we talk about Lil Willie, right? If you're doing it willfully and being stubborn and obstinate about it, that's the thing. You know what I mean? You how much more punishment are you going to receive because of that? So, like I said, when we've done these things, scriptures tell us that we got to be cleansed. Because these guys couldn't come back into the camp until what? Until they took a bath. They had to wash their clothes and all that stuff, right? So you got to be washed in the water and the blood. Got to have them both. Okay? You got to be washed in the water and be washed in the blood. Because the water washes the body, but the blood purifies the spirit, purifies the soul. So you got to have them both. How many witnesses we got to have? Either 2 or 3. So you got to have that water. You got to have that washing. You got to have that blood. All right, everybody with me? All right, so let's go to chapter 20 and let's look at verses 1 through 2, please.
And the children of Israel, all the congregation, came to the wilderness of Sin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled against Moshe and against Aaron.
Okay, so it says here that Miriam dies. So she was the first one of the 3 leaders to go. Right? It says that she was buried there and that there was no water for the congregation. Verses 3 through 5.
The people continued with Moshe and spoke, saying, if only we had died with when our brothers died before Yahweh. Why have you brought up the assembly of Yahweh into this wilderness that we and our livestock should die here? And why have you brought us up out of Mitzrayim to bring us to this evil place, not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there's no water to drink?
So what happened? They start murmuring and complaining because they've got the attention span of a goldfish. Okay? They don't, it's so, all the things that he's provided for them. And yet they still gripe and murmur and complain and, oh, why did we leave Egypt? We should have stayed there. Oh, it was such a great place to be. What with them being put under harsh labor and, all of the other things that happened to them. We're not even going to go into all that stuff. But all the stuff that was that and all the harsh taskmasters that they put, but that was such a great place to be. I'd rather be out in the wilderness without them over me and not be able to have some pomegranates or whatever. And again, I don't think it was ever near as bad as what they said it was. They're always talking about, oh, we don't have this and we don't have that. But like I said, the very first thing, their go-to. They always go to murmuring and complaining. And they're never happy with anything. It doesn't matter what the Father does for them. It doesn't matter how much Moses and Aaron put themselves out. It doesn't matter. How many times have Moses and Aaron been the only line of defense between them and the wrath of the Father? Yet they're the first ones that they complain to or complain about, right? And here's where they really start messing up. And it's not the first time they've done it. But they start wanting to go back to the way things used to be. We can't do that. Which one of us, let's be honest, which one of us in this building or out there in the Zoom room, which one of us could go back now, knowing what we know now, and walk in the way and go back to the church? It'd be impossible. It would be impossible. Just like this discussion that I had with this fella at my work yesterday. And we were talking about it last night. He was talking about, oh, how gifted his pastor is and his church this and his church that and da 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 da. You know, and you know, the question is, and I asked him, I said, well, let me ask you. I said, if the church is so wise and intelligent and so gifted with all of this knowledge, you know, why do they constantly and consistently break the word of Yahweh every day? We don't do that. I said, you don't? No. I said, you ever go out and get you a tree in December and put it in your house? Well, yeah, of course. I said, there you go. I said, go to Jeremiah chapter 10 and look there. It says, don't learn the way of the heathen. I said, you go to church on Sunday? Well, yeah, of course I do. I said, well, there's that fourth commandment that's being broken. Because it says, remember the Sabbath day. And I even pointed, I had a calendar back on my wall, back behind my desk. And I said, what's the seventh day on this calendar back here? Saturday. I said, who gave us the right to change the day that he set aside and sanctified? I said, so I don't want to hear that. But like I said, which one of us could go back to that? I don't think any of us could. I really don't. I pray that none of us could. Because that brings into scrutiny how you was walking before. You know, it's like Brother Tommy said, you know, when we took this thing on, I mean, we sold out. We took a dive, huh, Raven? Because once our feet left the ground, there's no turning back. There ain't nothing you can do. You can't go back, you know, can't go home again. You know, but that's the whole thing. They're looking through these rose-colored glasses, talking about, oh, the way it used to be. Oh, it was like this. Oh, it was like that. No, it wasn't. We call that the Mandela effect, right? They was believing some lies. They had worked it up and made it up into something that it wasn't. You know, and they'd much rather go back under that bondage than be in the freedom that the Father gave them. They wanted to come out of Egypt. He brought them out. But when things got a little difficult, they fell apart. And they wanted to go back. And just as an aside, y'all see this desert back here behind me? I put that up today because that's what I feel like. That's what this week has felt like. It felt like if we were in the desert right now. So that's the reason why I put that up. But the point is, like I said, he brought them out and brought them to a land that flows with milk and honey. And who's the ones that kept themselves? Who's the one that kept them out of it for so long? Themselves. And we do that. Sometimes we're a lot more hurtful to ourselves than being helpful to ourselves. Again, because we can't let go of these things. So we got to remember that where he brought us from is nowhere even to be compared with where he's taken us to. Well, Paul said, not even worthy to be compared to the glory that shall be revealed in us. You know, so we need to be extra thankful because he brought some of us, he's brought all of us from a place. He's brought some of us further than others, but he's brought all of us from a place that we didn't need to be to take us to a place that we should want to be. You know. Verse 8, please.
Take the rod and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, And you shall speak to the rock before their eyes, and it shall give its water. And you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their livestock.
Okay. So he tells them they're crying about they ain't got no water. So go to this rock over here and talk to it. Ma'am? He said, go speak to it, and the water's going to come out of it. But then in verses 10 and 11, go ahead with those.
And Moshe and Aharon assembled the assembly before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moshe lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and much water came out, and the congregation and their livestock drank.
All right. So what happened? Well, it'd been welling up and welling up and welling up for so long that the world's meekest man eventually lost his temper. And unfortunately, that's the thing that kept him out of the promised land. His anger. And we've talked about how dangerous anger is, right? Anger is a dangerous, dangerous thing. You ever notice a person who's accident prone? The reason why they're accident prone is because all they're doing is focusing on how angry they are. And that's usually what gets them hurt, right? Because they're thinking about their anger. They're focusing on that instead of the things around them. So the world's meekest man, his anger finally gets the best of him. And he smites the rock twice. Now, had he smote it once? I don't know. But he was told to speak to it, right? And then he smites it twice. And what is it? Because we know that this was Shaul talked about this rock that followed them, right? That spiritual rock that was the Messiah, right? This is where they get the water from. All right. So when he hits it twice, what does it do? It sullies the image of his son. And we have already spoken several times about this. He is not going to put up with anybody that puts forth an imperfect picture of his son. That is why if we have his name on us, we need to be walking this thing out according to what the book says. Because when we don't, we're smiting the rock twice. When we don't, we're not making it according to the pattern. When we don't, we're not using the right colors in the tapestries and the wall hangings. Our temple is imperfect. And it shows forth an imperfect picture of his son. And he will not put up with that. This smiting of the rock was enough to keep Moses out of the promised land. So if we're putting forth an imperfect picture of his son, I bet that that's enough to keep us out of the promised land as well. Don't want to think about that, do we? That's an ugly thought. Like I said, we all want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Been faithful over a few things. And when you think about it, the things that he asks us to be faithful over, that's not a whole lot to it. Is it? It's really not that difficult. Now, the world has a way that it does things. And they want us to conform to what they do. So the hardest part, I think, is like what we talked about last night. It's overcoming the world, the flesh, and the devil. But like we talked about, if you get that flesh under control and you get that guy out of the way, the other two ain't got nothing to hold on, just like a tripod. Okay, you got a tripod here. You take that flesh leg out of the tripod, and what's going to happen? It's going to fall over because there's nothing there to give it balance, right? Or to give it something. It needs that third leg to stand on. It's got to have that point. But when you take that away, the other two got to go. You know, there's no support there. So that's the thing. Let's not put forth an imperfect image of his son. Because we all want to hear, well done. We all do. None of us wants to hear, I don't know you. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I don't know you. Can you imagine how heartbreaking that would be? You try to walk this thing out every day, but because of something that you couldn't give up, that was keeping you away from him. And I mean, it's just that simple. This is what he expects us to do. This is how he expects us to walk. He gave us all the instructions, gave us the rules for living in the kingdom, gave us the Messiah to get us back to him, right? Give us his most perfect, most beloved thing in all of time and eternity to reconcile us back to him. What did he have to give up? You see what I'm saying? The things that we're asked to give up, it's nothing. I couldn't give up my son. I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. I know me. I couldn't do it. I'd be like, nope. I'd be kind of like what he was with Moses when he told him, he says, stand back. I'm going to consume these people in a moment, and I'm going to start all over with you. I couldn't do that. Couldn't give up my son. Yeah, exactly. People going to treat me bad, and I'm going to give up my only begotten son? I don't think so. But that's me. That's why I'm not Yahweh. And it's a good thing I'm not. It's a good thing I'm not. I'd have called all 12 of them. That's right. I would have brought all 12 of them. So I'm bringing an extra one just in case. Yeah, bring that 13th Legion with you. All right. Let's see. Let's take a look at what verse number 12 says.
But Yahweh spoke to Moshe unto Aharon, because you did not believe me to kadosh me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore, you do not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them.
All right. So he told them, he said, because you didn't believe me, you didn't do what I told you to, guess what? You're not going to bring them in. And that's the whole point of what I'm trying to tell y'all, and what I'm trying to tell me, and trying to tell us. And all, if we're putting forth the wrong image, right? If we're not living up to the to what we say we are or what we say we do, if we're putting out the wrong image, it's only going to bring separation from him. He's not going to bring us closer. He's going to, you got to go. Are we all perfect? No. But that's what repentance and the blood of Yahushua is all about. We're going to make mistakes. But it all starts right here, right? Because he knows the thoughts and the intents of the heart, right? But I ain't saying, oh, he knows my heart. I ain't saying that. But my point is, he knows what's in there and why I'm doing it. And he knows that I'm going to make mistakes. But I also know that I have an advocate with the Father. Verses 14 through 21, it talks about Edom. They were going to go pass through the land of Edom, and they sent a messenger and said, hey, look, if you let us pass through, we're going to go by the highway. We'll pay for everything. We won't let our animals won't eat none of your crops. We'll pay for everything. We'll go straight through. We're not going to stop. We're not going to, but Edom is like, no, that ain't happening. All right. And, the scriptures talk about that they have a perpetual hatred. But I'm going to tell you this. There's fear and hatred on both sides. Okay? They're brothers. And it shouldn't be that way. And this type of attitude flies right in the face of the commandment that says that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. So here's the thing. Edom was wrong. Israel tried, and Edom was wrong. And, but there's this perpetual hatred. It's been around for a long, long time. And it's going to continue to be there. All right? But the scriptures tell us, how do we overcome evil? With good. It says, pray for those who despitefully use you. Right? Pray for them. And we go back to talking about one of my favorite things to do. When they go talking bad, when people talk bad about you or they treat you wrong or whatever, all right, instead of getting back at them, do something good for them. Because the Bible says that puts burning coals on top of their head. Boy, and it burns them up. Especially when you tell people you're going to pray for them. That really makes them. When you tell them you love them. Oh, it gets them mad. And some of the people that it makes angriest is the ones that's in your own family. And they'll use you the worst. Ain't that right, Sister Alicia? They will. They'll use you the worst. But my Bible says that I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself. Right? In fact, that's one of the greatest commandments, isn't it? It's the second one. On those two, hang the rest of the law and the prophets. So the thing is, and part of loving them, to bring it back to where we were earlier, is being able to forgive them for whatever they've done. Got to keep our eyes open. So verses 22 through 29, we see that Aaron is not allowed to go into the promised land because of, now it says because of the rebellion at Meribah, which is where they struck the rock at. But it's weird because there's a whole lot of things that happened before that. The golden calf, and there's a bunch of, all that stuff happened before all of it. And so the point is, if that's the only reason why he's kept out. Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. It was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. You know what I'm saying? And then what happens? They carry him up on the top of the mountain. They strip his clothes off of him, put him on Eleazar. He becomes the high priest. And then what happens? Aaron dies. So his office is transferred to his son. And see, they changed the clothes out before Aaron died. You know what I mean? Because he couldn't die with the holy garments on. So his office is transferred to Eleazar. And so, I guess what we can really say is that clothes really do make the man. Because before this happened, Aaron was the high priest and Eleazar was just another priest. But once he put the clothes on, then what? Eleazar becomes the high priest. And Aaron is now just Aaron. Okay? And that's the thing. All this stuff we got on, this shows people who you are. And if we're not living up to what we say we are, we're giving forth any improper. Do you see how this all works? This is all just crisscrossing all over itself. Because the point is, if we say we walk one way, we got to walk that way. If we don't, if we're giving out mixed signals, right? What's it say about us? What does it say? That we're unstable, right? A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. All right? So if I'm sending out mixed signals, I'm telling you I do this, but you see me doing that. That means that I'm unstable. And to carry it a little bit further, we was talking about that me and another friend were talking about that scripture in 2 Peter, right? Where he's talking about Paul's teachings. And he says that those who are unlearned and unstable rest, that they twist it. Right? I used to love them Reverend Twister cartoons. But if I'm unstable, I'm twisting the scriptures to fit whose understanding or whose desires? My own. Well, because I want to fit in somewhere. So it's ultimately it's on me, right? Because it doesn't matter who it is out here. You can stand up to them and say, no, this is how I do this. Or this is, this is not how this is what the Bible. But if I want to be accepted by that person, I'm the one who has to basically bend to what they want. So I'm the one who does it. So he said, no man can take you out of his hand, but you can take yourself out of it. Okay? And how do we take ourselves out of it? By conforming to what other people want. Right? But what does it say? What does the Bible say? What doth the word say? It says, do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by what? The renewing of your mind. And how is my mind renewed? By what's in this word. And when I give myself over to it completely, right? If I'm really been renewed, then I'm not going to want to go do that thing or this or that or whatever. You see what I'm saying? That's all I'm trying to show, folks. That if we're saying that we're walking this thing out, we should be giving a very clear picture, not one that's muddied up and not one that's twisted and not one that's being put on to satisfy somebody else. Okay? You've heard me say it a million times. When you wake up in the morning, you have a decision to make right then. Am I going to walk this out or am I going to do what I want to do? Am I going to do what's right or am I going to do what I like? 9 times out of 10, the things that we like are not what's right. Who am I trying to please here? Am I trying to please myself or am I trying to please my Father? What did Yahushua do? He said, I only do them things that please my Father. So that's the one who I should be trying to please. Okay? All right. So we left off at the end of chapter 20. So we're going to pick up in chapter 21. And Rebbetzin, if you would please read verses 1 through 3.
The sovereign of Arad, the Canaanite who dwelt in the Negev, heard that Israel was coming on the way to Atharim and fought against Israel and took some of them captive. Then Israel made a vow to Yahweh and said, if you deliver this people into my hand indeed, then I shall put their cities under the ban. And Yahweh listened to the voice of Israel and gave up the Canaanites, and they put them and their cities under the ban. So the name of that place was called Hormah.
All right. So here we have this king who heard about Israel, and he heard that they were coming the way that the spies came. So he decided he was going to fight against them, and he took a few of them prisoner. So then Israel came together, and they told the father, if you will deliver these cities and this kingdom into our hand, we will basically destroy it. And so it says here that after they did, that they called the place Hormah. So here's the thing. We got to remember that the battles that we're in and the battles that we fight every day, they don't really belong to us. Okay? Because if we try to fight them with the strength of our arm, we're going to fail. All right? But the scriptures tell us that the fight doesn't belong to us, it belongs to him. Let's go to Psalm 140 and verse 7, please.
Psalms 140 verse 7. O Elohim, Yahweh, the strength of my salvation, thou hast covered my head in the day of battle.
Okay, so we talk about the armor, right? We got to have this head covering on. If we don't, who's going to go out into battle without having a helmet on? You know what I'm saying? Even in modern day military, they still wear helmets, right? So it's pretty important. But it's not, the psalmist didn't say, thank you for reminding me to put my helmet on. He said, thank you for putting it on me, So we got to remember that when we go out to fight, we got to remember who's the one who's really doing the fight. Okay, and the battle belongs to him. Let's go to 2 Chronicles 20 and 15.
Second Chronicles 20 and 15. And he said, hearken ye, all Judah, and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem, and thou King Jehoshaphat. Thus saith Yahweh unto you, be not afraid nor dismayed by reason of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but Yahweh.
So that's, whenever we come up against something, we got to remember that it's not us, right? We're not the ones who are going to win the battle. We got to give it to him and let him take care of it, because, I can only do so much. There's only so much that this little fat guy can do. I can't do a whole lot. But, if the enemy's coming at me from all sides, I got to learn to trust in him and lean on him and let him have it. I might be able to put 10 to flight, but I may not be able to get all of them. So, I need him to help me with it. Let's go to Deuteronomy 1 and 30.
Deuteronomy 1 and 30. Yahweh your Elohim, which goeth before you, he shall fight for you according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes.
And he did that, right? Remember, they had the Red Sea on one side and canyon walls on the other, and Pharaoh was behind him and he's pushing them. And, he told them, he said, these Egyptians that you see today, you'll see them no more, right? So he leads them through, and then, when the host of the Egyptians get about halfway across, he lets the water come back in and it drowns. So that's what I'm saying. We got to learn, we fight the battles. We fight our battles by keeping the faith and by praying and by trusting in him and by talking to him and, letting him know what we need. But when it comes to, when the enemy comes in like a flood, it says that the Ruach will raise up a standard against it. So that's the thing. Let him have the fight. Okay? Let him turn loose of it, because as long as we have a hold of it, he can't work with it. Would you agree with that, Rebbe? Long as we're holding on to it, he can't, so you got to turn loose of it. It's the same thing with anything. If you won't turn loose of it, then he's not going to be able to do anything with it. And the thing is, he in all of these scriptures, he's talking about, I'll fight it for you. Okay, I'll fight it for you. But there's actually kind of a secret code in here in these first 3 verses that tells us how we have to live our lives. What's it say that they called the name of the place? Hormah, right? The word hormah means devoted. So the thing is, we've got to be devoted to him if we expect him to fight our battles for us, right? We've got to have that devotion. We got to be walking after him. We got to be following him and following him closely, because if he's gonna if he's gonna fight our battles for us, we need to be close to him. We got to be right up on him, under the shadow of his wings, right? We got to be right there. So like I said, think about that. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that we're powerless against, but I promise you, he can handle it and he can take care of it. Let's read verses 4 through 7, please.
And they departed from Mount Hor by the way of the Sea of Reeds to go around the land of Edom. But the being of the people grew impatient because of the way. And the people spoke against Elohim and against Moshe. Why have you brought us up out of Mitzrayim to die in the wilderness? For there is no food, no water, and our being loathes this light bread. And Yahweh sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. Then the people came to Moshe and said, we've sinned, for we've spoken against Yahweh and against you. Pray to Yahweh to take away the serpents from us. So Moshe prayed on behalf of the people.
So here's the thing. I don't get it. I just don't get it because they're so quick to forget everything, right? And then they go to mumbling and murmuring and complaining and all this kind of stuff. And then the father says, okay, I'll tell you what, here, have some of this. And he sends an enemy, or in this case, he sends these fiery serpents, right? But I mean, how many times, and it is actually a rhetorical question, how many times are they going to have to suffer for murmuring and complaining before they realize they need to stop it? When you start doing all that murmuring and complaining, that's going to light his fire. And then he sends some flaming serpents after you. And that's, said that he bit these people and that it, that they died. But then right after, oh, we've sinned. Oh, we've done this. Why don't you think about that before you do it? Right? It's better to think of it. It's like what he said. Obedience is better than sacrifice, right? So why not don't do the murmuring and complaining, and then you won't have to deal with the aftermath, right? Put your hands up, give thanks, praise, right? The scriptures say that he inhabits what? The praises of his people, all right? When you're murmuring and fussing and complaining and griping and grumbling, there's no place for praise in all of that. So he's certainly not going to inhabit that, right? He's not going to inhabit the complaining of his people. That's not what it says. But when we murmur and we complain and we fuss and we grumble and gripe, all that does is upset him, all right? So again, you often, at least I do, I often wonder, why can't they get it? Why couldn't they get it? I get upset with the disciples a lot too, because sometimes I'm like, man, how are y'all so stupid? Because sometimes they ask some questions. It's like, what in the world are you thinking? But we're far more blessed than they were with our understanding of the word. But again, it's just murmuring and complaining doesn't do anything good for anybody. It makes the situation much worse. You've heard misery loves company. Well, it's going to get you the kind of company that you don't want. It's going to bring your enemy, or it's going to bring punishment, or it's going to bring something. You're going to get a whooping, right? In some way for doing that murmuring and complaining. So it's not up to us to do that. It's up to us just to, like I said, lift our hands up, give thanks, give praise. Hey, this is not an ideal situation, but I know that you're going to bring me through it. Simple. It's simple. And, and that's how we should live our lives. We should always be thankful for even, the small things. We should, that's what it says. Who has despised the day of small things? Often he works in small ways, but those small ways become something much bigger by the time that he's done with it. Little as much when he's in it. Verses 8 and 9, please.
And Yahweh said to Moshe, make a fiery serpent and put it on a pole, and it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. So Moshe made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole, and it came to be, if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived.
So here we have another image, or a picture, if you will, of Yahushua, right? Let's go to John 12, verses 30 through 32.
Okay, John 12, 30 through 32. Yahushua answered and said, This voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me.
Okay, so what is he talking about? He's talking about if he's lifted up on the stake, right? Because he's the only way back to the Father. And through his sacrifice, that's the only way that we could get back to the Father. So if he was, he had to be lifted up. It's just like when he told Peter, get behind me, Satan, because you're trying to stop me from finishing my mission. You're trying to stop me from doing what I was sent here to do, right? That's what the Messiah was saying. He's saying, if I'm lifted up, all right, him being lifted up on the stake is what saved all of us. Just the same way that if they got bit by the serpents and they looked on the stick that had the snake on it, well, if they looked at that, then what happened? They lived. Okay, and it's the same type of way. However, we know also in 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 4, what happened with that? What did they end up doing with the snake on a stick?
2 Kings chapter
18, verses 1 through 4.
Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old he was when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places, brake the image, cut down the groves, brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it
Nehushtan. Nehushtan. All right, so they were using it, they had kept it, right? And they were worshiping it. They were using it as an idol. There's never been an idol that they didn't like. Huh? You remember? Who was it Roy Rogers that said, I never met a man I didn't like? Or Will Rogers. I'm sorry, Will Rogers. I knew it was one of them Rogers. All right. Will Rogers said, I never met a man I did. Well, Israel never met an idol they didn't like. Because it didn't matter. Right? It could have been this one or this one or this one or this one or that. That's why he had to go to great lengths and tell them, do not create for yourself any graven Elohim. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear its name. I don't want to, and that's the thing. So it's a brazen serpent on a stick, right? So Nachash, all right, that's the word Nachash is where you get, it means like copper. Okay, in Nehushtan, it's copper, right? So but the root word is nachash, which means to shine or to reflect light. All right, like the snake, like the scales of a snake. All right, and even though they sound very close, nachash and the word nachash, nachash is the same word that they use for an enchanter, a wizard, somebody who whispers incantations, and it's after the hissing of the snake. Okay, so the whole thing is they had taken this man-made object and, of course, made an idol out of it. And they're so good at doing that. And we are too. We do the same thing, even in this time, day and time. We do the same thing. How many people have made an idol out of their job or their car or their kids or their pets? Pets are a big deal. There are some people that are more, and I read something about this the other day. They're more about making sure that their pet gets this super high dollar food and this and that and all this stuff, and the kids ain't even got nothing to eat. Leona Helmsley, she did that. Had an entire building, all these hotels and all this stuff, and left all of her money to her dog. That's kind of weird to me. But this just goes to show that anything can be made into an idol. And Israel's bad about latching on to idols. You know, anything that what is an idol? It's anything that we take and we put before Yahweh. Right? Yahushua said, if any man love father or mother or brother or sister more than he loves me, what about that person? You can't be his disciple. But, or he said, if any man doesn't hate his, but we understand it. We're not looking at it with the Western mind. We're looking at it with an Eastern mind. The word that they translate as hate doesn't mean to hate like what we think. It means just love less. Okay? So we've got to love him more than anything. More than our family, more than our pets, more than our car, more than our hobbies, whatever. You know? Because all of those things can very, very easily become an idol to us. You know, and we have to remember, when does it become an idol? When it becomes more important than the Father. When it becomes more important than his Son. When it becomes more important than doing the right thing. When it becomes more important than being in his house on the day that we're supposed to be here. When it becomes more important than celebrating his feast days, when it becomes more important than doing the right thing, that's when it becomes an idol. And that's when it's wrong. We all love our kids and we love our pets and we love our houses and all this. But like I said, we got to love Yahushua more. We got to. We got to. Verses 10 through 15, Mom, you don't have to read that, but it talks about they set forward and they pitched in Oboth and then they went to EJ Abarim. And so it talks about those 5 verses or 6 verses actually talk about them continuing to travel. And I think the important thing for us to remember is that we have got to keep moving forward. Because it's no good if we stop, right? We can't just sit down and rest on our laurels and say, well, I think we've come far enough. We can't do that. Scriptures say that he who endures to the end shall be saved, right? You got to make it all the way across the finish line. And it doesn't matter whether you're the first one across or you're the last one across. It doesn't matter. We just got to keep moving. We got to keep moving forward. It don't matter if you're running, walking, crawling, just inching along like a caterpillar. It don't matter, just as long as you keep moving forward. When you got a pond and it's got water coming into it, but the water don't go anywhere, what happens to it? It gets stagnant and it gets rotten and it ain't no good for nothing. You know? Well, when we do that same thing, when we sit down and we say, I've gone far enough, I'm not moving no further. Kind of like an old mule dig his heels in and become obstinate, right? I'll do what I want when I want. But that's the thing. They kept moving. Pardon me. They kept moving. And in order to make it to the promised land, because we have a promised land to get to as well, right? Y'all ever think about that? We got a promised land to make it to. Abraham's the book of Hebrews said that Abraham, he had his eyes fixed on a land that he didn't know, right? He had his mind set that he was going to make it there. And that's the thing. We all have the same thing. We have a place to go. We have a promised land to end up in. But if we don't keep moving forward, we're never going to make it. And it may take us 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70, whatever. It may take us a long time to get there. But we got to keep moving. Right? Ain't none of us good enough to where we can sit down and say, well, I've done enough. I'm good enough. I got it. I'm good. I'm done. We got to keep moving. We got to keep moving forward. That's how we're going to make it there. Got to keep walking. So verses 16 and 17, it talks about that they went to a place called Be'er. Now, the word bear means a well, okay? But they went to this well, and says that Yahweh spoke to Moses, said, gather the people together and I'm going to give them water. And then what happens? Verse 17 says, then Israel sang this song, spring up a well, sing unto it. It says that the princes digged the well and the nobles, and they dug it by the direction of who? The lawgiver. Who is who? So they digged the well, but they didn't go around striking any rocks. They sung to it this time. And they dug, and then the water came. All right. So they used their staves, and they, like I said, this time, it was just funny to me. I say funny. It's just that this time they actually did what they were supposed to sing. They sung to it. They spoke to it this time. But it would have been much better had Moses done that the first time. Had he spoken to it like he was supposed to, because it wouldn't have messed up the picture of his son. And then 21 through 35, it talks about two kings. All right. One guy named Sihon and another guy named Og. And so Sihon was the king of the Amorites, and he does not allow passage. But this time, what was different about what happened with Sihon versus what happened with Arad? What was different between these two? Sihon came out and said, look, we're going to fight. So they fought, right? And it says that Yahweh delivered him into their hand, right? And they took care. Now, Sihon and the Amorites, gone. They didn't allow that passage, and they paid for it. And then another guy, the king of Bashan, a dude named Og, sound like a caveman, dude named Og, he comes out against them, and what happens? The same exact thing. So the point is, when Yahweh's people are actually operating how they're supposed to, don't come against them. You see the pattern over and over and over and over again, because it's Yahweh who fights for Israel. That goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. If he's in the battle, who's going to win? It's always going to be him. So let him fight it. Right? Do the right thing from the beginning. Let him fight the battle. Let him be in charge. And guess what? He's going to take care of it. All right. So chapter 22, this is where we get into the second part of our Parsha. And this is Balak, right? So he's a king here. All right. So Balak, his name means waster or destroyer. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to destroy Israel. Right? Read verses 1 through 4.
And the children of Israel departed and encamped in the desert plains of Moab beyond the Jordan of Jericho. And Balak, son of Zippor, saw that all Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because there were many, and Moab was in dread because of the children of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company is licking up all that's around us as an ox licks up grass of the field. Now Balak, son of Zippor, was sovereign in the Moabites at this time.
Okay, so we've got Balak, the son of Zippor, right? And it says here that all Moab was in fear of Israel because they'd seen what they did to the Amorites. Kind of like with Rahab, right? Remember what Rahab said? She said, we've heard what y'all did. And, we're terrified. Made our hearts to melt like wax. But there's a good lesson here in these very first 4 verses. And what is that lesson? It's the fact that fear causes us to see things that aren't necessarily there, right? And to do things that we shouldn't. All right. The Moabites were afraid of Israel. But Israel didn't want to start nothing with nobody. They just wanted to make it on their way. And I think, I mean, I'm not Yahweh, but I would think that had the Amorites and had Og's people and had they just let Israel pass through to get to Canaan's land, I think it would have been a much different story for them. Maybe later on something else would have, but at that time, I'm sure that if they had let them go through, there would have been no problem. But have you ever noticed we talk about making a mountain out of a molehill? When we're afraid of something, what's the natural way for us to react to it? It's actually with anger, right? Yeah, exactly, brother. It's a fight or flight reflex, right? We always want to attack that thing that we don't understand or that we fear. And I think that that's a big problem, or that's a big reason why we get what we get. When we're at the grocery store and we're just doing our thing and people come over, and boy, it seems they want to start some stuff, don't they? They want to start a fight or whatever because we look a little different. We act a little different. Heaven help you if you tell anybody you don't eat a pork chop. I see you nodding your head back there, bro. See what I'm saying? Don't let anybody, you don't eat a pork chop or you don't eat seafood. Boy, they get weird. And then they get all worked up about it. But that's the main reason why we're not supposed to be, why we don't need to be fearful, because the Father's got everything under control. Now, back in Revelations where it talks about those people that's not going to be inside the city, who's the number one group that ain't going to be in there? The fearful, right? They're not going to make it in, right? So again, we need to have our eyes open. We need to be able to discern things. We need to be able to be logical and reason things, right? Pay attention to what we see, all right? We need to know that the Father's in control. And again, the biggest thing is Scripture say he didn't give us a spirit of fear, okay? So we shouldn't have fear in our lives. I'm not saying there's not times when we, aren't naturally fearful of something, but to walk around in a spirit of fear, that's something that we need to be able to overcome. And we overcome that by doing what? By having faith, by being, reading the word, by, relying on him. We overcome these things, like the Scripture said, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. That's how we overcome this stuff. All right. He doesn't want any of us to have this spirit of fear. But there are folks out there, and y'all know there's people out there that live in constant fear. All right. What did it say? It said that there were a bunch of people that through fear of death, all right, through fear of death, they were brought under bondage their whole lives. Their whole life. And that's a miserable existence. That's not living, that's existing. You know what I mean? You live under fear all the time. That is a terrible, terrible place to be. Where's that? That's in Hebrews, Dad? Maybe Sister Gabrielle would find it. There you go. Hebrews 2:15.
Hebrews 2:15, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage.
See, there was their whole life. And that's a terrible place to be. Yes, sir. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. It keeps us held down. You know what I mean? It keeps us in fear. It keeps us in bondage. It keeps us trapped. We can't grow. We can't stretch out. We can't, because we're forced to be in this little tiny box, and we can't break out because that fear has got us held captive, right? And that's the thing. He didn't give us a spirit of fear. That's what it says in 1 Timothy. He didn't give us a spirit of fear, right? But a power, love, and sound mind. And that's the thing. We have nothing to be afraid of. We've got the greatest name in all time and eternity. We've got his son. We've got the truth. We've got his word. We've got each other. What do we have to be afraid of? Right? To say in Romans, if Yahweh be for us, who can be against us? Now, I'm not saying we run right out there and we storm the Bastille walls, but what I am saying is we got nothing to be afraid of. You know what I'm saying? Because even if we do, if something does happen and we end up dying, it's a quick trip anyway, right? To be absent from the bodies, be present with Yahweh. So we ain't got nothing to be afraid of. Nothing. All right, let's look at verses 5 through 7.
And he sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, See, a people has come from Mitzrayim. See, they have covered the surface of the land, and they are settling next to me. And now, please come at once, curse these people for me, for they are too strong for me. It might be that I smite them and drive them out of the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. And the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian left with divination fee in their hand, and they came to Balaam and spoke the words of Balak to him.
All right, so here it says that he sent these elders and these elders of the Moabites and the Midianites. He sent these messengers to speak with Balaam, and what did they have in their hands? A reward, a bribe, a gift, if you will, right? What do we know about that? The scriptures tell us that a gift or a bribe, a donation, what does it do? It blinds the eyes of the righteous, right? We know that there have been many a righteous judgment perverted because of what? Because of a bribe, because of a reward, right? We've looked at that several times where it says that the love, in the King James, it says that the love of money is the root of all evil. That word right there is actually the term avarice, okay, which just means greed. And it could be greed for anything. Could be greed for money, could be greed for power, could be greed for sexual gratification. It could be anything, but it's a reward though, right? All of them are a type of reward. And so here they come with this reward in their hand to try and sway Balaam to come and do Balak's bidding. All right. So he tells him, what's he tell him? He says, look, stay here. I'm going to go pray. But whatever Yahweh tells me, that's what I got to do. Is that not what he says? He says, whatever he says, that's what I got. I can't venture outside of what he says. So they say, all right. So read verses 8 through 12.
And he said to them, spend the night here, and I shall bring back word to you as Yahweh speaks to me. So the heads of Moab stayed with Balaam. And Elohim came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? And Balaam said to Elohim, Balak, son of Zippor, sovereign of Moab, has sent to me, saying, see, a people has come out of Mitzrayim and covered the surface of the land. Come now, curse them for me. It might be that I am able to fight against them and drive them out. And Elohim said to Balaam, do not go with them. You do not curse the people, for they are blessed.
All right. So here's the thing. Balaam is a prophet. True. And he already knew that you can't curse what Yahweh's blessed, and you can't bless what Yahweh's cursed. So here are these guys coming and they want him to destroy the people of Yahweh. So where's his first mistake? Not telling them, get out of here. That's the first thing. Because, you know, he couldn't do anything against Israel if he wanted to. So, you know, instead of doing what's right and not putting him, remember we talked earlier about putting yourself in situations, right? He kind of puts himself in the middle of this situation. And later on, we hear him speak a phrase that kind of really lets you know where he's at. Right? So the problem is he did receive his answer, and that should have been the end of it. So they leave. Then some more guys come. Right? Let's read 13 through 17.
And Balaam rose in the morning and said to the heads of Balak, go back to your land, for Yahweh has refused to allow me to go with you. And the heads of
Okay,
Moab.
hold on for just a second. So, like I said, right there, verse 13 tells you, he said, go back to your land. Yahweh has refused to let me go with you. That should have been the end of it. Cut and dry. Correct?
Yes.
That should have been the end of it right there. Go back to where you came from. I cannot go with you because he said, I can only do what Yahweh tells me I can do. Yahweh said, don't go with them. So go ahead and continue. Thank you.
And the heads of Moab arose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. Then Balak again sent heads more numerous and more esteemed than they. And they came to Balaam and said to him, this is what Balak son of Zippor said, do not be withheld from coming to me, please. For I esteem you very greatly, and whatever you say to me, I do. Therefore, please come, curse this people for me.
So says here that now he sends a second group, right? So who did he send this time? He sent people that were more honorable. Right? My scripture said that he sent princes. So before he just sent elders, but now he's sending princes, right? And he sends even more than what he sent before. And they come to Balaam and say, I'm going to promote you to a very great honor. And I'll do whatever you say unto me, right? If you'll just come and curse this people for me. So I think this kind of gets Balaam's wheels turning a little bit. He's thinking, whoa, wow, now. At first he sent these one dudes, and now he's sending these princes and stuff. And he says, what else he tells him? He's going to promote you to a very great honor. You know, I'm sure he probably got to thinking about it a little bit. So they come again and they sweeten the deal. Verses 18 and 19.
And Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, the Balak were to give me his house filled with silver and gold, I'm able to go before the word of Yahweh, my Elohim, to do less or more. And now, please, you also stay here tonight and let me find out what more Yahweh says to me.
So there you go. So now I think Balaam is actually kind of feeling him out. Look, even if Balak was to give me his whole house full of silver and gold, right? You let him know I can be bought. You know what I'm saying? I can't go outside of what Yahweh tells me. But here's the problem. He already knew what the answer was before. Yet he's now entertaining them again. And they're bringing even more things to delight the eye and all of this kind of stuff, right? We know that he already got the answer, and that should have been the end of it. Yet here he is entertaining them again. Do you see the problem here? He knew what was the right thing to do. The right thing to do would have been, no, y'all got to go. Y'all got to leave. I don't want to hear what you got to say. You got to go. But that's not what he did. So he's listening to him, you know. Like I said, he already knew what his answer was. You know, and he said he already knew that he wasn't supposed to do this. He knew it from the get-go. Yet he's doing what you ever heard of people call dabbling in something? That's the problem with dabbling in something. Okay. You dabble in a little of this, you dabble in a little of that, and pretty soon you're going to be all up underneath of it. You're going to be in over your head. You ever heard that term, being over your head? You're going to be over your head in it. You may just stuck your toe in to see what, but before you know it, you're going to be all in it. Ma'am? Yeah, everything is wet. Because like I said, it's going to get a hold of you and it's going to pull you down. All right. Verses 20 and 21, please.
And Elohim came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise, go with them, but only the word which I speak to you that you do.
Now pay close attention to verse 21.
And Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the heads of Moab.
So Yahweh said, if they come and get you, then go. But what happened? Verse 21 tells us that he rose up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and then he went with them. It doesn't say anything about them, coming to him. He got up early and went out there and saddled his donkey, making ready to go. You see what I'm saying? That dabbling, then they sweeten the deal, right? And now he's in over his head. Now he's in too deep. So he gets up. He was supposed to wait on him, but he didn't. He went on his own accord. So verses 22 through 27, it lets us know that because he got up and left, and years ago when I was a younger believer, I'm like, wait a minute, he told him to go, and now he's mad at it. Well, it makes sense because he didn't do what Yahweh told him. Yahweh told him, if they come and get you, right? But the scriptures don't say that he did that. It says that he got up early, saddled his donkey and all this stuff, and then he went with them when they left in the morning. So verses 22 through 27, this is a kind of a funny part.
But the displeasure of Elohim burned because he went, and the messenger of Yahweh stationed himself in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. And the donkey saw the messenger of Yahweh standing in the way, and his drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam beat the donkey to turn her back into the way. And the messenger of Yahweh stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards with a wall on his side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yahweh, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he beat her again. And the messenger of Yahweh went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn aside right or left. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yahweh, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's displeasure burned, and he beat the donkey with his staff.
So the donkey sees the Malach Yahweh, right? First, she runs off through a field. So what's he do? He beats her because she didn't do, Then she mushes his foot against the wall, and he does what? He beats her again. And then he's in a real tight spot where there's no way to turn to the right or the left. So what she do? She lays down, and he beats her a third time. And she's trying to see, that's exactly right. She's trying to save his life. Here we have a case where the one that you would expect to be wiser is the more foolish of the two, right? Let's go to Romans 12 and 16.
Romans 12, verse 16. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits.
All right. So we've got a case of somebody knowing so much that they can't see the forest for the trees. And sometimes it's like that. Sometimes we're like that. We get the big head because we think, oh, I got this. I know this. I know I read this book and I read that book and I got this revelation and all this kind of stuff. It's just like what we were talking about last night with that guy on TikTok, right? He got all this knowledge, so much knowledge that he speaks against the Son of the living Elohim, talking about that he was the one that got thrown out of heaven and doesn't even know the language that the book is written in. Yeah, we'll talk about that later on, brother. Yeah, that was a crazy thing. A buddy of mine came to me and he was confused as all. But what really made me happy about it, and this is what I was telling Dad, it made me proud because he told me, he said, man, I watched this guy over and over and over again. He said, and the more I listened to him, the more confused I became. He said, so you know what I did? I said, what's that? He said, I just shut the thing off. And he said, you know what? He said, I'm going to go talk to, now, you know, they all call me by my nickname, right? He says, I'm going to go talk to Squig tomorrow because I just don't understand this. He can explain it to me. That made me feel good. You know what I'm saying? Because he trusts me enough to give him sound counsel and good advice, you know, sir. So anyway, you know, here we got a case of a person who should know better. And who put him in the situation? He put himself in it. Yeah, the flush. That's exactly right. We got the flush, right? He put himself in the middle of it. So if y'all was upset with him, it's not the donkey's fault. The donkey's trying to save his life. You know, that's what I'm saying. Talk about the, you know, remember where it talks about in the scriptures where it talks about that he's chosen not many wise, you know what I mean, and not many noble has he chosen. You know, he chose the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And it's much in the same vein here. You got a donkey, a dumb brute beast, as the scripture calls, and she's smarter than the man of Yahweh. She don't. Yeah, exactly. She ain't got no agenda. Her only thing is to serve her master and try to keep him alive. And that should be us too. We should be there to serve our master, not to worry about what can we get out of it. What's in it for me? That's not what we were created for. Right? We were created to serve him, not to serve ourselves. So like I said, we got a case here where the one that we would think would be wiser is the one who's actually the foolish one. 28 through 35. Now the donkey actually speaks. And, you know, and she's like, am I not your faithful donkey? Have I not served you all these years? And he ain't think nothing about it. You know, he's like, I wish I had me a sword. I'd kill you right now, you big dummy. I wish I'd had me a sword. I'd slay you where you stand. And he ain't thinking nothing of it. And there's a donkey talking to it. You know, but it says that the donkey speaks, and then what happens? Then his eyes are open, and he can see the Malak Yahweh. All right. The desires of our hearts, which in this case, what was the desire of Balaam's heart? He wanted that payola, right? He wanted that cash money. He wanted them dollar bills, right? That's what he wanted. But I'm here to tell you that the desires of our hearts, if they are not righteous, they will bring about the wrath of Yahweh. Amen? Let's go to 2 Peter 2, 14 through 17.
Second Peter 2, 14 through 17. Having eyes full of adultery that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, a heart that they have exercised with covetous practices, cursed children, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass speaking with man's voice forbade the madness of the prophet. These are wells without water, clouds that are carried with a tempest, to whom the midst of darkness is reserved forever.
This is talking about those guys that are looking for the high places in the feast, right? They're the ones who want all the notoriety and they want the adoration of men. And Rebbitzin, I'm surprised you said them bad words in that thing, right? You called him a dumb, no, I'm joking. I'm just picking with you. But my point is, this, and I know we've talked about this an awful lot over the past few weeks, but this is an example, yet another example, right? Where the gift and the growth don't match up. Here's Balaam, and the Yahweh himself is speaking to him because he is a prophet. He's speaking to him. Yet his avarice, his desire for that reward is where? That's his growth, right? His gift is way up here. But where's his growth at? It's way down here. And we got an example, like I said, where they're not matching up. It's just like your song said, Dad. Are you balanced or do you lean to one side? If we take your little man and we only put one foot on that little stand that he's on, what's he going to do? He's going to lean to one side and he may even fall off. But he's going to lean because he's not balanced, right? And that's the thing. This is what was going on with Balaam. He wasn't balanced. His gift was far above what his growth was. He was a pretty smart guy. But he was using it for the wrong thing. All right? So we need to make sure that our gift and our growth are close to each other. They need to be more like this instead of being like this or like this. You know what I'm saying? They need to be more in line with each other. All right? One thing that struck me about verse 41, if we look at verse 41 in chapter 22, I want you to pay attention to this. It says that it came to pass on the morrow that Balak took Balaam and he brought him up into the high places of Baal. All right. And there, so that he could see the utmost part of, so he could see the whole camp of Israel out there. But where did he bring him? Into the high places of Baal. Now, we already know that Israel wasn't supposed to go into the high places, were they? He also tells him, go and build me 7 altars. Did he make sure to tell him, don't make them out of anything that's had a tool laid on it? Nope. Here's the thing I want you to know. We talk about we need to be following him and we need to be walking like him. And let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you a big secret right here. I'm not going to do like Paul and hide it. I'm going to tell you a big secret right here. Here's a mystery. You can't offer the sacrifices of Yahweh in a place that's dedicated to false Elohim. Okay? It's just why that's exactly the same reason why he had to leave in Ezekiel chapter 10 and 11. Right? He couldn't stay there anymore. He wasn't welcome in his own house anymore. Said that he moved from between the cherubim and then he went into the doorway, and then he went from the doorway to the courtyard, from the courtyard up on the mountain, and then before too long, where was he? Gone. The spirit was gone. Because they had thrown him out of his own house. Because they were forcing him to have to share with other Elohim. Remember in Ezekiel chapter, it talks about this image of jealousy. Okay. So going back to Hormah, if your heart is not devoted to him, and we're the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh now, right? And if I'm taking Yahweh's sacrifices, but I'm burning them on an altar that's dedicated to another Elohim, do you think that's going to be acceptable? I tell you no. You cannot take the sacrifices of Yahweh and offer them in a place dedicated to false Elohim. You just cannot do it. So we need to know, and we need to make sure that our house is swept and clean and fit for his inhabitants. Thank you. I lost the word different. But it's fit for him to live in. Because I guarantee you, he said, my glory I'll not share with another. Isn't that what he said? So don't think. Exactly. Or my praise with graven images. Do not think that you're going to be able to bless Yahweh and reap the benefits and the rewards if you're putting pigs and stuff on his altar, right? That can't happen. So we're going to kind of speed up a little bit. We still got 3 chapters to go, but they're all really actually fairly easy. So I'm just going to go ahead and take it from here, Rebbitzin, if you don't mind. So chapter 23, verses 1 through 10, Balak brings Balaam and he says, curse this people for me. So what happens? He goes into a trance. He does his sacrifice. He goes into a trance and he blesses them. And old Balak gets mad about it, doesn't he? He said, what are you doing? I brought you here to curse these people, and here you are, you blessed them. And he says, well, I told you. I can't say anything that my Elohim doesn't tell me to say. I can't speak against it. So here's the funny thing. What's Balak's answer? Well, I'll tell you what. I got another place we can go, as if that's going to make any difference, right? I got another place we can go. Maybe Yahweh will let you do it from there. So they go on, which is probably another place dedicated to Baal. It doesn't say. But in the second one, they do the same thing. They go to another place. Same setup. Give me the altars and give me 7 bullocks and give me this and give me that. He does it. Boom. Blessing number 2 comes out. Now Balak's really upset. He's like, look, I told you to curse them. And now you blessed them a second time. Balaam tells him, I told you. I can only do what he'll allow me to do. I can only say what he'll allow me to say. The scripture says that there's no enchantment against Israel, right? Isn't that what it says? All right. So, yeah, you can't curse what Yahweh's blessed, and you can't bless what he's cursed. That's why you can't pray over that plate full of shrimp and eat it and glorify him with it. It doesn't work that way. Like I told this other dude I was talking to, we were talking about food. And I told him, I said, man, them things got a job. Their job is to clean the earth. I said, you the bug man. He works for the pest control company at my work. I told him, I said, you the bug man. I said, what if I told you go over there and get that light trap and pull that glue board out and lick them flies off of there if you want something to eat? Would you do it? Heck no, man, that's disgusting. I said, well, don't you think that that's how he feels when you eating all these things that's not considered food? I said, we talked about Acts chapter 10 and all kinds of stuff. We went all over the place. But I told him, I said, man, you can't pray over something that's not food and it be magically converted into something that's going to be good for you. It doesn't work that way. So in verses 27 through 30, they move again. He said, I'll tell you what, I got a third place we can go, and perhaps then he'll let you do the thing. So in chapter 24, verses 1 through 9, he's up on this highest hill and he's looking over, and the scriptures tell us that he actually looks, right? He looks, and it says that he lifts up his eyes, this is verse 2, and saw Israel abiding in his tents according to their tribes, and the spirit of Israel, or the spirit of Elohim, came upon him. And there was nothing he could do. Right? He had to, it was like a fire shut up in his bones, and he had to let it out. So he blesses them a third time. Now old Balak is gone completely over the edge. He said, I sought to do good things for you. But here you've done this, and you've done this, and you've done this. All right? But then in verses 14 through 24, what happens? Balaam says, well, listen up, because I'm fixing to tell you what's going to happen to you. So then Balaam does what? Instead of pronouncing a curse on Israel, who gets the curse pronounced against them? Balak and his boys. The Moabites and the Midianites, they get the curse. So it's just like you said, remember you told when Yahweh woke you up that night? Yahweh can definitely reverse the curse. And it doesn't matter where you're at in your life or what you're up against. He can reverse it for you. But you got to get out of the enemy's camp. You got to get clean. You got to get in his camp before he can do it for you. Quit making them sacrifices to devils and demons out in the field, right? Get in the camp. But something happens in between chapter 24 and chapter 25. Because it tells us in verses 1 through 3 of chapter 25 that Israel now, they begin to mingle with the Moabites. And remember, we just talked about the snake on a stick not too long ago, right? So they start to mingle with the Moabites, who were worshipers of Chemosh. Okay, that was the deity that they worshiped. So they begin to sacrifice to false Elohim. And they begin to partake in the worship of Elohim who are not Yahweh. And this is precisely the danger of syncretism. We've talked about syncretism before. What is that? That's where you take things, take different, a piece of this religion and a piece of that one and a piece of this one and some of that one over, and you mix it all together. And that's what we're talking about. You take all this stuff, you just mix it all together, and whatever comes out, hey, that's, put a little crystal stuff in here and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, So here's the thing. We know the way to walk, right? So that's what we need to do. No reason to go searching for new age this or, there's no reason for all that. Okay. Yeah, that's it. I don't care if it is Jewish mysticism. You don't need it. Okay. I don't care if it is nature or whatever. You don't need it. Okay. All I'm saying is, people are going to do what they want to do. But when you start mixing stuff together like that, that's like where it talks about don't mix, this seed with that seed, and don't mingle in a wool fabric and a linen fabric to get, because they're not woven from the same cloth. They're not the same thing. You know what I mean? And one's going to pull one, and one's going to pull at a different rate than one does, and it's just going to be a mess. Here we don't have to guess. We know what's allowed and what isn't. Well, this rabbi says this, but this rabbi, blessed memory, he says that. And this sage says this. And this one over here said something. That's it's just confusion. It's what we call a muddled mass of confusion, right? So best just to stick with the book and say, if it says Let your yes be yes and your no be no, right? If it says do it, do it. If it says don't do it, don't do it. Verses 4-5 of chapter 25 says here, and Yahweh said to Moses, take all the heads of the people and hang them up before Yahweh against the sun, that the fierce anger of Yahweh may be turned away from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, slay every one of his men that were joined to Baal Peor. So, I don't know about you, but my Bible says that the wages of sin are death. And because of this situation, because of this mingling, right? Because of this turning their back on Yahweh and going after these other Elohim, which they knew they weren't supposed to do, but because it appealed to their flesh, it appealed to their flesh, what happened? They lost 24,000 people that day because of that. Now, through all the plagues and the attacks and the snakes and how many people have they lost by now? A lot of them. But they still don't learn. This is why we talk about remaining teachable, right? They don't listen. Like I see, how many burning bushes do you have to see? How many how many burning snakes you got to, you know what I'm saying? How many do you have to see before we make the correct decision? I'm one of them people, I don't like getting a whooping. My mama will tell you, I never liked it when I was a kid. I don't like getting a whooping. I don't think anybody did. Y'all see this belt she used to beat. Ooh, she used to beat me. She used to beat me terrible. Ooh, it was terrible. She beat me with the fly swatters and all kind of, ooh, man, she was bad. She was rough on me. I'm picking. She's a good mama. I was just joking. But seriously, though, you got to remember, man, that there's a price to be paid for sin. And that bill is always going to come due. You're exactly right. Divorce said it's always going to be way higher than what you want to pay. You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be a price for sin. And that bill's going to come due one day. Best not to owe anything. And then verses 6-9, this is where it talks about a guy named Pinchas. You may know him as Phineas. Old Pinchas said that they were standing out there, and here comes an Israelitish man and a Midianitish woman. And they just waltz right through the middle of everybody and go get in the tent and right there in front of everybody. And old Pinchas does what? Says the scriptures say he got zealous for his Elohim, and he grabbed his javelin and he run both of them through. And that's the only thing that stopped the next plague that was coming. So here's the thing. Sometimes we find ourselves in a situation that we don't want to be in. But we've got to remember that 9 times out of 10, we're the ones who put ourselves there. And we have nobody to blame but ourselves. Through our murmuring and complaining, through our disbelief, through our dabbling, through our lack of faith, so on and so forth. You name it. Most of the time, we're the ones who put ourselves there. But, you know, I have to go along with Samuel on this thing. Wouldn't it be better just to do the right thing in the first place and not have to deal with any of the fallout? I think it would. Are we always going to make the right decision? If we're thinking with this brain, this peanut brain of ours, no. But if we rely on the good counsel of Yahweh, right? If we rely on the answers from his Ruach HaKodesh, if we rely on what the word says and we follow that pattern, we'll make much better decisions. I've always wondered. You ever hear somebody, you ask them, "Oh, I got to pray on that." I wonder how many of them ever do. I'm just, like I said, I'm not pointing any fingers in. I'm just saying, I wonder how many folks actually do that. Oh, I got to pray on it. I just wonder how many of them do. But anyway, look, I said all this to say this today. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. But I want us to make good decisions. That's what I want for us. I want us to make good decisions. I want us to make wise decisions. I want us to rely on the Father. I want us to lean on Him, right? Because if we lean on Him, the answers that come are always going to be on time. They're always going to be righteous, and they're always going to be the right thing. And that's what we should be seeking, right? So, like I said, let's make good decisions. Let's not make snap judgments. Again, touching back on what we said a couple of weeks ago, let's learn to discern. Because discernment is very, oh, what's the word? It's a very overlooked, right? It's very, it's overlooked a lot. But discernment is one of the gifts of the Ruach. Seems like everybody wants to speak in tongues, but they don't want to be able to discern anything. Like I said, let's make good decisions. Let's make decisions that the Father would be proud of. We be more like His Son. He's going to love us all the more, right? So anyway, love you. Appreciate you. That's going to do it for my Parsha.